America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the Civil Rights Act, and particularly Title VII of the Civil Rights Act that introduced sex into the Civil Rights Act. And I'm going to start off with a video from Martha Griffiths, who was a congresswoman who was actually legislating. And let's just think about what she was thinking when she advocated to put sex in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Here we go.
Most important changes that have taken place in respect to the status of women since you've been in Congress?
Well, I think perhaps the most important change was the one that added sex to the bill of 1964. This bill was drafted really to help Negroes. Now, it wasn't clear. It would have meant that Negro women would have been given rights that were not available to white women. Therefore, we added sex. It is my belief that the drafters had assumed that no women would get any rights. So that I think both white and black women were helped by the bill.
Most important changes that have taken place in respect to the status of women since you've been in Congress?
Well, I think.
So you have to think about what that means. What's Griffiths saying right there? She's saying that actually the Civil Rights Act was for the Negroes. It was for black people. You know, we were lynching them, we were locking them out of jobs. A generation ago, Woodrow Wilson kicked them out of the federal government. There was the Ku Klux Klan was coming. So we needed something to actually secure rights for black people, right? And what that implicitly means is that we need to take some of the privileges that were reserved for white people and make sure that they're not either parasitic upon or exclusive of black people, all right? And so she said that, well, okay, that would make sense, except I want to make sure that white women do okay. So it was okay to take some of the privileges that were reserved for white men and make sure that like they were shared with black people. But the idea that some of the privileges that were reserved for white women would be vulnerable to the claims of black women, that was touched too far. So you put in sex in order to give white women a claim to protect their privileges, which makes the Civil Rights Act of 64, once you add sex, functionally a completion of a quality of white supremacy that has now been laundered through white women. Right. So now you have women and minority business loans, women and minority, programs, as if there's the same sort of subordination. Right. And this is actually controversial because Helen Hacker introduces this in 1951. She was like, all right, so we didn't actually used to think of women as a minority group because it doesn't really make sense to think of them as a minority group because we want to genocidally either subordinate or exterminate minority groups. So we want to keep them out of the United States. And, so it doesn't really make sense to think of women as a minority group. However, if we do think of women as a minority group, all of these interesting facets open up in women's lives. And by women, she means white women, not minority women. So she introduces in her essay, this is Helen Hacker's essay, Women as a Minority Group, as a way to strategically wrestle power away from white women. Forget the fact that it actually subordinates the struggles of real minority groups and including the women, because then it gives white women power to subordinate the claims of non-white women, right? So this idea that women as a minority group is a great power play for white women while actually confusing the discourse, one, between gender, because women are not a minority group. They're part of the reproduction of the majority group, right? So let's actually just talk about that for a little bit, about why women are not a minority group. Because being a minority group isn't about necessarily numbers. It's only about numbers in a kind of democracy, but they aren't numerical minorities, right? So that's not the issue. It's about subordination and power, right? So are they a minority group in terms of power? Well, there is no universal sisterhood. However, there are families where you're immediately related to your mate, right? So women can't sue other women for breaking up with them and divorcing them, but they can sue their husbands for. Women don't inherit from other women for being women, but they inherit from their fathers for being daughters, right? So before the 50s, we pretty much understood patriarchy as a family regime. The Montagues and the Capulets were patriarchy, not because they supported women, but because the patriarchs violently fought each other. The Hatfields and McCoys is an example of patriarchy, because patriarchy is a family game where your in family is fighting another family that's headed by men, right, who take the brunt of the violence. So patriarchy isn't organized in order to subordinate women directly. It's organized to violently exterminate outgroup men, right? And it is organized, and it needs women to reproduce, right? So this idea that mates are on the other, are antagonistic towards each other is a little bit ridiculous. This idea that mates are the primary antagonism in social life is hugely ridiculous. It's the equivalent of confusing the immediacy of a sibling rivalry with the violent genocidal logic of settler colonialism, right? So siblings fight more than cowboys and Indians, right? But siblings do not exterminate each other as a rule because they see themselves in each other, right? So that's the same relation. That's a similar relationship with mates. It gets a little bit more complicated, but it's a similar relationship with mates. Don't let white people confuse you into thinking that they're on the different sides of don't let white women confuse you and think that and tell you that they're on the other side of their father or of their son or of their spouse. And don't let white guy spouses confuse you. Even the most conservative Republican white guy spouse has no problem putting his wife on, or leaving his business to his daughter and putting his wife as the owner of his company, of his roofing company. So many white women conservatives own roofing and plumbing companies, but I never see them on roofs or under sinks. As if they're on different teams. As if they're on different teams. They see themselves in each other because their fates are tied, because while their antagonisms are immediate, they are immediate. They are not violent, and they are not as serious as like the antagonisms between, real racial groups. So to treat that as a real racial group actually just empowers white women against the claims of racialized others. So this is what Griffiths is saying. Now, with this in mind, I want to play the clip again. Keep this in mind.
Perhaps most important was the one that added sex to the bill of 1964. This bill was drafted really to help Negroes. Now, it wasn't clear. It would have meant that Negro women would have been given rights that were not available to white women. Therefore, we added sex. It is my belief that the drafters had assumed that no women would get any rights. So that I think both white and black women were helped by the bill.
Most important change.
This was a power play from white women to keep power within the white family and protect whatever privileges they had from the justice claim of black women and the justice claims of black men. Right? This was a power play, explicitly so. Adding sex into the civil rights movement was a huge boon for the Southern racist conservatives, which is what Howard W. Smith, as Josiah Andre in the comment section has alluded to, Howard W. Smith wanted, right? And it worked out. Now, it produced in professional class white women a quality of apex predator that then got to be indifferent to labor politics, indifferent to like more substantive gender politics, and indifferent to racial politics, because they were too busy thinking about themselves and centering themselves. And as a result, we get a politics that has nothing, that can't deal with Philly's Karen. So our inability to actually like make sense of the Civil Rights Act of 64, fast forward decades later, makes it the case that now Philly's Karen has a claim by right to the ball that she did not even get. Now you could say that, well, she was closer to it. No, I play enough soccer to know that unless you have it in your hand and possessed, it's a free ball. There's no goalie who says like, well, I was closer to it. No, there's like, she should have leapt over the chair and leapt over a chair and put her hand on it and secured it. He didn't take it out of her hand. He was actually closer to the ball than she was because he had a practical means to get to the ball rather than she, as opposed to her. So, you know, closeness and distance, you read your Heidegger. It's a practical determination. If you can't get to the thing, and the person can get to the thing, that person's closer. For example, if I can buy a airline ticket to Paris and someone is in Spain but can't afford to, if I have a passport and I can buy an airline ticket to Paris, but someone's in Spain and can't afford a trade ticket and for some reason can't leave their country, I am closer to Paris than that person because distance is a practical matter. I can get there faster. I can get there first. So to say that she was closer, although that there was an obstruction that she was thinking about climbing but didn't quite know if she could or would want to, versus him who had a straight line to the ball, that's presuming a notion of distance that doesn't actually track, right? So distance is practical. He was closer, and you know why he was closer, because he got there first. He secured the ball first. And then now, with all of this in mind, watch the video again. So notice how comfortable she was putting her hands on that man, right? She can do that because she's a woman. That's one of the privileges. A guy would have gotten socked by right. And it's not really clear to me that if she would have done that to me, I wouldn't have popped her because I'm a feminist like that. But the casualness with which she felt comfortable putting her hands on that man makes her think that she has no idea what it's like to be a man. Because no other man would have put their hands on that man unless he was willing to defend himself from all matters of ugliness. When you do that as a man to another man, you know that you are being it's a fight. This is about to get violent in front of the kids. So most men wouldn't have done that to other men, right? But because she's lived life as a professional class woman for so long, she felt comfortable doing it and she didn't get popped. So that just reinforces having been hit by many women and never once actually striking back. I get hit because I'm a little bit mouthy. So every now and then I get slapped, punched. Not by my current wife, but it's happened before a few different times by a few different women. They just feel comfortable hitting me. talking. So she felt comfortable putting her hands on him, and that's what happens when you live life on easy mode. So we are not cognizant of the quality of privilege that it takes to think that that's how you get to that one, you deserve that ball, and that's how you get to contest your grievance with respect to how you think you deserve that ball. And you want to know why Republicans are going to win for the next few elections? Because it worked. And the white guys are saying no more. They don't want that anymore. They don't want, they're done with it. They're done with it. You're trying to start, these professional class white women are starting to treat white guys like they treat black guys and black people. And that's not, excuse me. That's not part of the gig they signed with the civil rights movement. And they're going to fight back, and they're going to fight back with J.D. Trant. They're going to fight back with Trump. They're going to fight back. Like the alt-right movement, then the conservative wave of white guys, young guys are like, no, that's not going to be me. Like, you can call me all the names you want, but like, I'm not, like, if I ever get that ball and I give it to my kid's keeping the ball. and that is the backlash we're facing in America, is because conservatives look at that and they know that was an unscripted moment, unlike the text messages that we've gotten from Tyler Robinson. They know that that's an unscripted moment, and they don't want that to be the America they live in. They want to be able to out-hustle, get the ball, give it to their kid, and not be called misogynist, and not be like, and not have to worry about someone coming, some chick grabbing them and expecting them to give the ball away. Though that is an example of, I mean, that's the backlash we're facing. That's the backlash white men are under, and they don't want to be treated like black men. they do not like that. They do not like that, and this is how they're fighting back. And if you want to actually take your country back, you're going to actually have a hard talk with Karen about how that's actually not her ball. The dad out-hustled it, and she needs to give the ball back because she did not deserve it. And, they tried to the Phillies tried to do an end around by giving the dad a different ball, but you need to take the ball away from the woman who secured it. Because these white guys on the conservative, like, as a matter of culture, they're not going to take that, like, that as a normalization. Now, it would be one thing if Karen were, like, utterly competent, but no, she's not fast enough to get the ball. She's not the better parent. Karen didn't go over and give it to a kid. The dad knew that the first thing you do when you get a ball is give it to a kid. He gave it to his kid. There's no way that kid grows up to be a feminist. So the mom kept it for herself. And that's actually, I'm not a huge fan of liberal mom parents. I don't think they're the greatest parents, but that's actually indicative of, like, liberal mom parenting. The mom had no problem. It's not just taking it from him, but saw that the dad gave it to his son and was okay expecting the kid to surrender the ball. It'd be one thing to, like, which is still inappropriate, to go and harangue the dad. But as soon as you see that he gave it to a kid, you just take your L and you go back. You go back because that's family court for a lot of people, right? Women thinking about themselves as opposed to what's best for the kid, and then taking, like, away the relationships. So I'm going to play that one more time, just for you to understand the moment. All right, so that doesn't happen without the Civil Rights Act, without sex being instituted in the Civil Rights Act or installed in the Civil Rights Act because she doesn't think she has her claim. Because the only claim she could have is that, like, you took it away from me because you're a man and I'm a woman. That would be the only claim by right. No other man would make that claim on that guy. No other man who's been used to being a man, who grew up as a man, who grew up a boy, would march over there, because the men would know that unless you secured the ball in your hand, it's your ball. And then real men would go over there and see that he gave it to his kid and say, like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter anyway. Especially if that woman doesn't have a kid to give it to. It'd be one thing if she took the ball and threw it to her kid. I'd even let that kid be a girl. If she just took the ball and gave it to the nearest girl she saw, I would be like, all right. But no, in true style of the professional class feminist, she took it and kept it for herself. She took it and kept it for herself. And that is the problem. But that was the whole impetus for the introduction of sex in the Civil Rights Act. So white women wouldn't have to give up anything, and they could take other people's stuff and have claims to take other people's stuff for themselves. So now they have claims against white men and protection against black men and black women because of their sex. Now, with that in mind, once again, watch Griffiths.
That have taken place in respect to the status of women since you've been in Congress.
Well, I think perhaps the most important change was the one that added sex to the bill of 1964. This bill was drafted really to help Negroes. Now, it wasn't clear. It would have meant that Negro women would have been given rights that were not available to white women. Therefore, we added sex. It is my belief that the drafters had never had assumed that no women would get any rights. So that I think both white and black women were helped by the bill.
It's just the truth. It was a power play. It was a way for white women to eat off everyone's plate. It was a way for white women to eat off of everyone's plate. They got to keep the privileges of being related to and part of, like, the white racial economy of, like, fathers and daughters and siblings and mates, while also protecting themselves from the claims of, the people who actually need civil rights, needed those kinds of civil rights. Now, what women needed was legislation against paternalism. They needed very particular legislation against paternalism. And you have to think about the variety of paternalism. Well, they didn't let them get credit cards. Nobody got credit cards. Nobody got credit cards in the 60s. And the only people who got credit cards were people of the kind of standing that you could protect against. You had to show that you had to make enough money. And since we didn't even have a culture that knew how to, like, extract liens or imprison women for debts or anything like that, we didn't have a culture for that. We still barely have a culture that knows how to put women in prison because we don't want to do that to the kids. It's like, so, and punish women. We didn't have a public culture of, like, creditors extracting money from women. So we made their dads sign it because we knew we could get money from them. Right. So it wasn't that credit card companies didn't want to make money from women. It just, they couldn't collect from them. And it's not as if, like, landlords didn't want to rent to women because, women are great to rent with because if they pay, they keep the place cleaner. Right. So landlords would love to rent to women, but if they don't pay, what are you going to do to get women? What are you going to do to extract pay from them? Can you make them work in the same way? Can you put them in jail in the same way? Is the culture going to support you extracting your rent from them in the same way as it would extracting that from, their father, right? So there are lots of other reasons why women need to break from the paternalism, which is different from patriarchy. Remember, patriarchy, we're talking Hatfields and McCoys, Montagues and Capulets, and, like, people who want to exterminate each other. Paternalism is someone who wants to subordinate while keeping you on the same side and taking care of you. It's the patting on the head. It's a condescension. which is still a form of injustice. And it might be a little bit more immediate, and it might feel more immediate because they see themselves in you and you see themselves in them. So it might even like cut deeper, but it does not cut as violently as someone who does not see themselves in you and wants to extract and wants to kill you, like exterminate you. Like there's not a paternal relationship between people and cockroaches, right? So so what we need to think about is how we could have gotten rid of the paternalism that governed too many women's lives. But also, when you think about the paternalism, you have to think about what paternal protection meant. And that's just not a discourse we're willing to have. And since we didn't have that discourse about like what paternal protection meant in the lives of women, especially dominant class women, what happened was, since we treated them as a racial group, got them all the rights that we were supposed to do as a form of racial justice, they took over institutions and now keep the same sensibility of paternal protection, which keeps Karen from getting smacked when she puts her hand in, because we're not supposed to hit women. And like I said, they got to eat off of every plate, right? And in the industries where they've taken over, now we extend that kind of paternal protection to those people. So we like it causes huge accountability problems in public education. It causes huge accountability problems sometimes in healthcare. It causes huge accountability problems in things like mental health. Well, like as soon as women get a critical mass within the industry, we have a hard time holding industry professionals accountable. And it then destroys the industry. And instead of addressing that, the conservative backlash is uglier. We could actually address this problem by separating racial differences from gender differences, because gender is a reproductive principle within the race and subordinated often by racial concerns. Women have, like especially white women in the United States, they have the gender identity they have for the racial project of being white in the United States, because we needed women to be a certain kind of way, a certain kind of perfect victim, a certain kind of innocent, naturally moral creature, in order to justify and legitimize the violent policing of outgroups, of outgroup men, right? Because the aim was always outgroup men. So we have the gender discourse we have in the United States because of the racial project of the United States. Look, if you want more of this in harder detail, you could read Tommy Curry's The Man Not. You could read Social Dominance Theory by Jim Sedanis. But you need to be able to tie what Griffiths says to Philly's Karen 60 years later. Griffiths says, I want white women to be able to eat off of everyone's plate. I want protection from men, but also protection from, Negroes, Negro women. And then Philly's Karen, that's Philly's Karen eating off of everyone's plate. And then you got Trump and Vance and all of that. That is the backlash against that. That is the backlash against what happens when we empowered the wrong class of women in order to make them kind of apex predators. But now they don't have any natural predators. They don't have any, we gave them the tools to take out the blacks and take out white men, and the white men do not like that. The white men do not like that. And once again, I think this would be different if professional class white women were better at things, if they were, better at business, better at families, or better at politics, but they're not particularly better at politics, they're not particularly better at business, and they're not particularly better at families. So in the midst of all of that failure, white guys are fighting back. They could be bad on their own. All right. If you appreciate what I'm saying, you're not going to find anyone who's drawing the link between Martha Griffiths and the Civil Rights Act and Philly's Karen, and then Trump and Vance and all of that as a backlash against creating a super predator that we can't. The real super predators are professional class white women. They are the real super predators. They have no natural or artificial predators themselves, right? So the real super predators. And so thank you for taking the time to sit with me through the argument and for watching. And if you appreciate what I'm doing, go to www.funkyacademic.com. Kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. Because, would you believe, some of the feminists who watch this are a little bit punitive. And they will they will punish me and not offer me jobs or opportunities. Yeah. So in the following video, I described the distance between this woman.
Important changes that have taken place in respect to the status of women since you've been in Congress.
Well, I think perhaps most important change was the one that added sex to the bill of 1964. This bill was drafted really to help Negroes. Now, it wasn't clear. It would have meant that Negro women would have been given rights that were not available to white women. Therefore, we added sex. It is my belief that the drafters had assumed that no women would get any rights. So that I think both white and black women were helped by the bill.
Between this woman and this woman. So it took the right sort of alchemy of entitlement, privilege, and the presumption of right in order for Philly's Karen to secure that ball. Like anybody else would have ended up fought and or baller. Like to be able to take the ball from the child, took the right kind of cultural and alchemy for Philly's Karen to be able to secure that ball. And that's the cultural alchemy that the American right wing is now fighting against. And until the Democrats take that seriously, like the right's going to continue to win. And I don't want that to happen because that's not particularly good for black people. It's not particularly great for justice. But justice requires white women to take a seat. And that's not exactly going to be the most popular view either. So that's where we are. If you appreciate what I'm doing, go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick down $5, $15, $50 a month, and I'll continue doing what I'm doing. And to be clear, we could have had legislation that addressed paternalism. It would have had to recognize the benefits of paternalism, which kept Philly's Karen from being smacked in the mouth, while redressing some of the more untoward, deleterious aspects of that kind of condescending paternalism, without confusing it for racism, and using it then as a cover to have programs for women and minorities, as if women were minorities, as if white women were. Now Philly's Karen gets that contract before, a black guy or a black woman, right? And that is what people are fighting against. Peace.